Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will continue our discussion of Chapter 4 of Observing the Craft, The Pursuit of Excellence.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have Very Worshipful Brother David Colbeth from King Solomon Lodge number 60 in Auburn, Washington. Worshipful Brother Stephen Chung from Prince Charles number 153 in Kelowna, British Columbia. And I'm Matt Appel, and I'm a member of Mill Creek number 243 here in Montlake Terrace, Washington. And as I said earlier, we are going to continue our discussion of Chapter 4 here. And these guys are going to keep telling me how wrong I am. So get out your flogs. And
No. We're missing Jarrod, so we need to have a voice of dissent.
Although I feel like I should, I don't know if I should pull back the curtain or not, but I'll do it anyway. David and Jarrod actually had already recorded a couple episodes about these. They had done a couple episodes about this chapter, and due to some technical issues, not all of the recordings came out. So we ended up we're trying again here. So I guess
Stephen kind of cool because we weren't there, right?
Exactly. A Stephen and a Matt equals a Jarrod, apparently.
Well, they'll be published just before this. So if you want to hear the part that I messed up on, just go back and listen to that 2 episodes.
Oh, I didn't realize we were releasing those too. Oh,
well, the first one, we put the first one out, and then I thought, I can't do the second one. Anyway, so they'll be out. You can still get at least several episodes on Chapter 4. So. Anyway.
All right. So, where were we? We said we left off about page 66 or so.
Yeah, I was commenting that I read the top paragraph of 66, which if you have the hardbound book list, the special edition that Jarrod has, then you won't be able to follow that. But us common folk have the paperback, and the second the first paragraph, the bottom half, it talks about that in an attempt to seek new members rather than having men seek us out as they always has done. And I added my comments, is society not seeking? And so I think even in our other recording that we missed, this is where we started off again on the second part, was that is society not seeking the ideals of Freemasonry like it maybe it used to? I think that was the question I threw out. And that
I kind of actually feel like this is maybe a topic broader than this book, but I feel like in society, in the interest that we're seeing, at least at our lodge, from men in our area, that there is sort of an uptick in that spiritual seekingness that I think they're talking about here, or that Andrew Hammer is talking about here. I could be wrong, but I feel like there's always some fraction of society that is that person, right? They're looking to, they try Buddhism, or they try Christianity, or they try meditation, or whatever it is. And some of those people end up at our doorstep. And I think we do have something to offer them.
I 100% agree. We have lots to offer them, right? And as the guy who receives most of the initial contact for our lodge, it's very disappointing, actually, to know how many guys reach out but don't follow up, right? And the next step is theirs. They seek out, they get some information, and the next step is theirs. And are they not following up? Because they find out that there's a lot of work involved in improving themselves, or wasn't quite the social club they were expecting or hoping it to be. I don't really know, right? But we tell them what to expect. So
And I have thoughts, not surprisingly. So there's how. So you read that in the last episode, Stephen, you read an excerpt from an email about chasing potential members, potential Masons. So at what point are we chasing them, and at what point are we making ourselves available? I mean, if Masons only ever met in my basement and never ever talked about Masonry with anyone ever, then it would die, right? If there's that extreme, and there's the extreme of whatever, mailing petitions to people randomly, or whatever, blanketing the area with petitions in the mail. Somewhere in the middle there exists where we ought to be, probably, right?
I don't know about that. I'm still. I think I got to really side with Andrew Hammer on this one, where I believe that it is to be sought out by the individual, and even though I'm the guy that's in the head of the recruitment and retention committee, and I'd love to see greater numbers and greater membership. I think the quality of man that comes from seeking his way and pursuing his path, because it's not just seeking; it's they've got to pursue it, right? You can seek it, but once you find it, you got to pursue that, right? And I guess that's why one of the reasons we call them seekers, right? A true seeker will follow through and pursue his journey, right? And I think that when you start reaching out and to remind people that you're there because you haven't heard from them for a while, I think we're chasing, and it's a fine line because you'd like to also see the membership, but I have also experienced and witnessed over my 23 years a lot of guys come and go. So it obviously wasn't for them, right? Because as we've heard, it's not for everyone.
Well, yes, and there's something to be said about not recruiting people, but what also about branding and awareness, making sure that Masonry is a viable option, that people know about it. I went through my 38 years of life before I became a Mason, not 38 now. my first 38 years of life, essentially not knowing anything about Freemasonry. I mean, I guess that's not quite true. Probably 30 years at least of not knowing anything about Masonry. And then when my great uncle started talking to me about his experiences in Freemasonry, then I had some inkling of it, but still didn't really know what it was about. So is it not that society is seeking what we have, or potentially maybe the society's changing, but also I was thinking that, I don't know what the population numbers are. I probably should have checked it between the last time we recorded and this time we recorded, but just if we look at the population of the United States, for example, or the world in general, and let's say 1 in every 1,000 people was a Freemason back in the late 1700s, early 1800s. Let's just use that as an example. Now, my guess is that the population ratio is 1 to 100,000, right? 1 to or more. I mean, it's not. It's Matt's running the numbers in his head as I'm rambling on here, but it's a significantly different. While the population increased significantly in the 50s, it has declined just below, as we've seen on charts before, just below the overall population of Masonry, numbers of Masonry, below what it was in the early 18th century, or right, no, 19th century, excuse me, early 19th century, 1800s. And so, but the population has exploded comparison to the total population then. So Freemasonry was a more visible thing, almost to its detriment, than that there was degrees were being sold in the dockyards, and for $25 I can make you a Master Mason kind of thing. Well, not $25, would have been 25 cents probably back then, but there's a lot more people now, and so is Freemasonry as visible and prevalent? Of course, there's lots of other organizations too. So,
well, I think you make a very good point. I don't think that it is as visible and prevalent, and I don't think as many people know about it. It would be really cool to think that everybody knows about Freemasonry, but your example of your own experience is a prime example of this 38 years of your life that you didn't know about it, right? My story is a little different. I knew about it from my teenage years, but um, I think that though I don't think we should chase, I think we should. It's our duty to inform the public that we're here and that we exist. And
do we do that through advertisements or just being the pursuit of excellence, being good people, and we bring that to the population?
Well, I don't know that advertisements so much. I I am really torn about that because I've been a marketing person most of my life, and so I believe that good marketing is beneficial, and I think that letting people know. I think that our building presence in our community, if it's well sign, if you have good signage on your building and a good, it'll give you a definite presence in the heart of your city. I think that that's pretty good. The rest is marketing, which is borderline of, to me, recruiting.
Yeah.
Right. Though, how do people know about that you're here if you don't tell them? Right. So it is really a catch-22, and one I really struggle with a lot. Lately, I've seen in BC, we have a program, a Cornerstone Project and a Marker Project, right? And the Cornerstone Project put a QR code on our building, right? And it takes them to a page that will have markers and links and information and so on. So now what are we doing there? Are we marketing, or are we answering questions that somebody is seeking out, right? And that's the way that's kind of put to us. So I've seen some buildings that have put posters on their buildings, large murals, if you will, that have stories or statements or one-liners to make you think about Freemasonry, right? And people are debating, is that marketing? Well, I think our buildings should um, speak to the public, and I think that some of that's a good thing. Anything beyond that, to me, really feels more like marketing.
So, in his contrarian idea, the top of 69, I'm going to jump ahead just a page. He says that ultimately the decline in numbers does not equate to a loss of validity. So masonry is still valid, still a good thing, but the loss of numbers are okay. And that this loss of validity, it's a mindset of a missionary and not a Mason. I put a big wow next to that. I thought, so or should we be concerned? We've had shows. One of our shows was, masonry is not downsizing; it's right sizing. Right? I think that was the title of it. And so, are we just experiencing something that's normal? But if we look at the overall population again compared to the Masonic component of that, we're becoming smaller and smaller and smaller faction.
Well,
that's okay though, right? Is that okay?
I kind of think it is, in one sense, if you think about it. And this has been brought up several times in discussions in many Masonic circles, that when the war was over, we had a mass influx of membership. Our numbers grew exponentially because guys that were no longer in service were looking for something that gave them that fraternal aspect, that bond, that brotherhood with the guys that they served with, right? And it naturally had led them to seek out something like that. And of course, that kind of bond and brotherhood and fellowship is found in Masonry, right? So I believe that we had
it can be.
yeah, true. True. It can be. It can also, you can have other problems there too. Yes,
Well,
but I
I
do
think
believe
I
that
think that's some of
our
the
numbers were artificially inflated by that aspect alone. So now they're kind of dying off, and our numbers are going backwards. But isn't it to reduce the scale?
well, again, it's right sizing potentially, and maybe those
Yeah.
guys that made Freemasonry what their Freemasonry rather than what it maybe should be. I don't know. I don't know that maybe this new crop of Masons that's coming in the last few years might change things. I know there's something that struck me, and I forgot we should probably have talked about this, is that this book was written, what, 10 plus years ago? And so the issues of today may not be the same as the issues of 10 plus years ago. And just like our previous
But even
series,
this talks about, there was a previous, right? How many years before that?
well, right, Whither Are We Traveling was 40
Yeah,
60 years before this. So
right.
yeah.
So, and it's still relevant. I think it's the same relevance today.
Yeah.
2010.
Oh yeah. So 13 years. So it might have been slightly different. I think I would agree that there has been I don't know if it's due to COVID. A lot of people are marking it as a COVID effect, the COVID effect that people are coming in after COVID. But I think it was already started previous to COVID, that there was an interest level, a more serious interest level of Masons coming in, men seeking something else, something more. That was a wry smile, Matt. Do you not agree with that?
No, I mean, I want it to be true. I would like to see that. I would like to see a. It's hard to tell in the middle of a wave if a wave is happening.
Yeah.
Is it, or are we? Is it gonna whatever? Is it doing this and it's just whatever the pent up demand from those 3 years, or is it an actual long term change? I don't know yet.
But do we want a wave or do we want the tide to rise? I think we really want the tide to rise more than the more.
That's what I'm saying. Is I don't know which it is.
Sure,
it could be either one.
Sure, it's a pretty small wave if it's a wave, right? So far. Well, back to your. Sorry, Matt. Go ahead. Oh, back to your point, Steve, in your email that the guy that's coming in has to be serious about the endeavor, and Andrew talks about there is a bit of my concern, even though kind of again surgical table of masonry here, that some of the guys that have been coming into our lodge, even though we bring them through the 6 steps and they are more serious about masonry, I think there also is a little bit of, in some cases, a lack of commitment. And we're seeing that across membership. It's not just, I shouldn't blame just the new guys. And so all those new guys that are listening, it's not about you. I'm not talking about any, I'm not going to name names, but I'm not talking specifically about you, because there's some that are engaging. But there are, we've got 80 members. There's probably 60 that or so that could come if they want to, maybe 40 actually that really could come if they want to. And then there's, so why aren't all y'all coming? Where's this commitment level? We are officers of our lodge. We kind of internally bite our tongues about, well, it's just the 4 of us or 5 of us or 10 of us. And then we think we're concerned. Do they think we're running the lodge? Because we're not running the lodge. Although I guess we are, because we're the only ones showing up. I mean, not for meetings, but for the core stuff, right? For temple board and discussions about the progress of the lodge. At the meetings, we get 20 some guys or so to come. So it's a good meeting number. But to dive further into masonry, to be more serious about masonry, to make it a real endeavor and that commitment, the man has to decide to have that commitment, right?
100%. And we have the same kind of ratio happens here, right? So I don't think it's a singular occurrence. I think it's very common. Lack of commitment is a real issue these days, and I tell everybody, you're gonna if you've petitioned a lodge before, or you've knocked on the door, you've talked to somebody before, they'll say, oh yeah, it's only one meeting a month. But I tell them, depending on what you're looking for, if they're looking for that connection and that fellowship and whatnot, I tell them that you should be expecting 3-4 nights a month, right, to go out and visit and participate in your area, and to get the true effects of Freemasonry. You got to participate, and that I think does scare off some of them. But then to me, it tells me that it wasn't for them.
Yeah.
So Steve started off his comment with 100%, and I would say 50%. Yes, the guy needs to be committed, and I agree that the more one seeks and one puts effort into Masonry, the more one gets out of it, which I don't really love the phrase, you get out of it what you put into it. But on some level, it's kind of true. But also, the lodge has to make an effort. And putting aside the whole seeker thing, once that guy has taken his entered apprentice degree, the lodge has to put in an effort to have something appealing and something meaningful and something that man is looking for. Because I warn our candidate.
Who's the lodge?
What's that? What's that? I'm sorry.
Who is the lodge, though? When you say the lodge has to, well, who is the lodge?
Well, I would argue when someone's an entered apprentice, they're not. I mean, they're in the
you're only talking about the
lodge, but they're not.
Okay, you're only talking about the new guy.
Well, I'm talking about all of us. We all have to offer all of each other a some kind of something, right? I mean, there's not a there. I've never been to a meeting of King Solomon. I'm assuming it's an awesome meeting that everyone would love if they were to show up at. But there are lodges out there where
there's no value. You're saying the lodge has to give the guy value and a reason to come, right?
Exactly.
Well,
I know,
and that brings a debate of what is determined to be value, right? And if we want to talk about being an observant lodge, right, or and it really, I mean, our lodge is going to have this big debate coming up here real shortly, because we've got to now look at ourselves and our numbers and go, who is Prince Charles Lodge? I mean, we used to just be known for doing good ritual, right? And now we're not just known I mean, yeah, we do good ritual, but we got our numbers are down. We got to focus. Are we going to be a social lodge? Because now we've got different guys saying, I want to have some social things, and we got other guys saying, well, I want more education. And well, where are we going to focus? Are we going to have these fractions, or are we going to try and deliver a whole package, or are we just going to
that's a great segue into page 69,
right? And unfortunately, we talk a lot, and our time is coming to an end. So if Matt can wrap us up, we can maybe start 69 in our next segment.
We can start 69ing in our next segment, indeed. So
thanks, Matt.
Real quick before I do, because otherwise I'll forget. Stephen, you said you had someone you wanted to talk about real quick on the.
Yeah, wanted to say a shout out to brother Craig Graham. He's a regular listener, listens to us on the road, to and from Kamloops, and when he's sitting out in Kamloops and nothing to do, and on these work nights that he has to go on the road, shout out to him. He gives us a lot of feedback regularly, and we appreciate him listening.
And we appreciate all our listeners, and we definitely appreciate the feedback. So please do, if you're out there and you think if you side with me, please make some comments on on wherever, on YouTube or Facebook, and we'd love to hear them. And with that, on behalf of David and Stephen and Jarrod and myself, thank you all for listening to the Working Tools podcast. We'll talk to you again soon. Goodbye.